NJCORE, are you on?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. And Diana, do I have you on here too? Diana, do I have you on?
Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, perfect.
Yay. I've been burned by webinars before, so I'm going to apologize to you all as we're setting this up. But everyone is in listening only mode other than the speakers. My name's Joanna. I'm with the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. I just wanted to make sure that the audio and everything is working. If there are any technical issues or questions at all during the presentation or any questions at all, please put them into the chat box for us, and we'll try and answer them as we're going along. And just for everyone's, and I'm going to say this that once we actually get started at 4:30, this presentation is being recorded, so we'll share it out for you all, and we'll do the same with the PowerPoint and additional materials as we go through them throughout the presentation. Thank you all who are on the who are with us today. My name is Joanna. I'm with the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. We're going to get started in a few more minutes. We're just going to give folks some time to get on the presentation. Everyone is muted, just so you all know. And if you have any questions, please put them into the chat box for us, and we'll answer them throughout the presentation. But we're going to get started in a few more minutes. Thank you. Amani has a question. Can you just type it into the box, please? Thank you. Hi, everyone. This is Joanna. I'm with the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. This is the role of teachers and educational support professionals in supporting undocumented students. We're going to get started in one more minute because I'm still hearing folks coming in, but I want to make sure that I give everyone some time to log into the program in the system. All attendees are in listen-only mode, and if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box on your screen. Thank you. Hi, all. This is Joanna from the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. Yes, we're actually giving it one more minute for folks to start because I could still hear and see people coming in. So I want to give folks one more minute to log on before we get started. Thank you. If you're having issues with audio, you can please text into the chat box. Everyone should be able to hear only. Everyone's in listen-only mode. You are not able to speak on the presentation. If you have any questions, you can type them into the box. Thank you.
The conference is no longer in listen-only mode. The conference has been muted. The conference has been muted. The conference has been unmuted.
A lot of feedback in the background. How do you do that? Not just that.
The conference has been muted.
Hi, everyone. If you're on a computer, could you please let us know if you can hear the audio through your computer? Because we're checking the audio here to make sure it's working. Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you all so much. My name is Joanna Calle. I'm with the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. I just wanted to introduce myself, and then we're actually going to get started. I think most folks are on. If you're having trouble with your audio, let us know, but it looks like everything is working, so that's wonderful. The presentation is being recorded, so we'll be sending out the PowerPoint, the presentation with audio, as well as any kind of additional materials that we think we should share with everyone else. So do put in your questions in the chat box for us, and we'll go from there. Again, my name is Joanna Calle. I'm the program coordinator with the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice, and this is going to be a presentation on the role of teachers and educational support professionals in supporting undocumented students. We're here with the ACLU of New Jersey, NJCORE, and United We Dream. The folks at United We Dream were unable to actually present on directly, but they actually have trained Dina, our outreach coordinator, on the information she is going to present. So just so you all know, it's coming from United We Dream, and they are really supportive of what we're doing here. So I'm also handling the controls here, so bear with me when it comes to questions that you might have. And please send me either direct messages to the chairperson or put them on the chat box if you have any questions. Thank you all. So we're going to get started. As you can see, here's information about the presenters. Again, I am Joanna Calle. I have Diana on let me make sure I unmuted you, Diana, again, because I think I muted everybody again. Give me 1 second. Diana, are you on?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Great.
And let me make sure I have a NJCORE on here as well.
I'm here.
Technical difficulties. Oh, you're perfect. Yay.
Yeah.
Wonderful. We have Diana from the ACLU. We have Dina Mansour from the NJAJ, and Akai Kaur from the New Jersey Caucus for Rank and File Educators at NJCORE. As you can see, this is a bit of an overview of what we're going to cover today. It's a pretty broad coverage of an overview of what's going on right now, how teachers can support their students, resources available for teachers and educational support staff, and then next steps in terms of advocacy and what's available at the state of New Jersey, and local actions, and basically what we think you can do to get involved and support your students. As a quick personal note, I used to teach. I taught in Newark 3rd and 4th grade bilingual ed. I myself was an undocumented student, so I'm actually really happy to see so many people join today, and so excited that you will be in your classrooms doing this to really support your students. So glad that you're all here with us today. So we're going to get started with Diana on the federal immigration system.
Great. Thanks, Joanna. So my name is Diana Wainu. I am the Policy Counsel of the American Civil Liberties Union of New Jersey. So I'll be talking about the federal policy, the executive orders that were issued back in January, and how that can actually impact us in New Jersey on the local level and schools as well. So the executive orders do a terrible disservice to this country. It really characterizes undocumented immigrants as criminals, and they also threaten to withhold federal funding from. They threaten to withhold federal funding from places that refuse to help the federal government round up and deport residents. the orders essentially eliminate any prior policy of prioritizing people convicted of certain serious crimes, and instead it really makes everyone a priority, so that now the federal government will be targeting anyone who is charged with a crime, even if they're not convicted or proven guilty of the crime. It also targets anyone who abuses public benefits, which many advocates think that could ultimately take the form of looking at families that have mixed status, so families where some people might be U.S. citizens or visa holders or lawful permanent residents, but other members of the family are undocumented. And this is particularly concerning for children who are U.S. citizens but whose parents are undocumented. And so there's a lot of a fear that the federal government will be targeting those families, looking at the children who are entitled to public benefits, but the benefits being issued to the household, where folks who may be undocumented could potentially be benefiting from the entitlements of U.S. citizens within the house. And the orders also target anyone who an immigration officer even thinks poses a risk to public safety or national security. So there really is no commitment to what has been to the policy that was campaigned. The policy that was campaigned was targeting only the serious criminal offenders, but that's not even the case. It really has been broadened so that everyone becomes a priority for the federal government to round up and deport. The orders also encourage more contracts between the federal government and local governments that would give local police officers the power to act as immigration agents. And these contracts can really take many different forms, but so the orders really encourage the federal agencies to enter into these contracts with whoever really wants to enter into the agreement. And the orders also they also impose the policy of quickly rounding up and deporting people. Currently, there's a mind-boggling backlog of about 520,000 immigration cases. So we have only a handful of judges whose job is to hear people who are suspected of being undocumented and allow them to, present their case as to why they should not be deported. Maybe they are seeking asylum. Maybe they have a legitimate reason to be here in the United States. Maybe they're even lawful permanent residents or U.S. citizens. But there's a tremendous backlog, and so people across the country are waiting years for their immigration proceedings, and the presidential administration's plan to deal with that backlog, which would only grow if they deport people the way they want to, is to actually start drastically deporting people without a hearing. And so the executive orders really do paint a very frightening picture of what the federal government is going to be doing, entering into our communities and really tearing communities and families apart. And so what does this actually look like in reality? Well, the federal government's plans for these mass deportations, it means that the federal government will be relying heavily on state and local police officers, and because the federal government simply just doesn't have enough people here in New Jersey, or in any state for that matter, to do all of this work on their own. And so this approach will, we believe, invariably lead to racial profiling and the violation of people's constitutional rights because, for instance, police officers cannot constitutionally hold someone in their jails without a court order. So when Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, calls up police officers to say, hey, can you hold on to this person for 2 days until we can come down to pick them up? Really, the police department is they're exposing themselves to liability because there have been numerous cases across the country where cities have been sued for violating people's rights, for holding people when they should have been released or when they shouldn't have been held at all because there was no criminal charge or no reason to suspect criminal activity. So we believe it's going to result in violation of people's constitutional rights. It's going to result in racial profiling because of the rhetoric, the narrative that has been used for a long time, but most prevalently during the campaigns leading up to the Donald Trump's election and since his election. Many people have come to think of immigrants as only Latino immigrants and have come to think of undocumented immigrants as only Latino undocumented immigrants. And so we believe that Latinos are going to be racially profiled. And really, New Jersey has seen a lot of progress over the years in the way that our police officers operate. And so we really can't afford to go backwards by engaging in activities that violate people's rights and destroy the trust of community members. And so now I know there are other speakers who will talk about the many things that educators can do inside the classroom to support students. I'm going to briefly share a couple ways that the federal policy will impact schools. So the first one is resource officers. So if your school or school district has a policy that funnels students into the criminal justice system, students may end up with a criminal record that makes them a target for ICE. And these policies could ultimately, directly or indirectly, sweep students into the crosshairs of federal immigration officers. I also want to talk about ICE operations in or at schools. So schools have previously been designated as safe zones, and federal agents were not supposed to conduct operations there. But we don't know if that policy is going to continue. That policy could be revoked or changed at any time. But we do know that even if federal immigration operations aren't happening in schools, we do know that they are happening close to schools. There are stories of parents who have been picked up by immigration officials after dropping their kids off at school. Just a couple blocks away, they find ICE officials waiting for them. Also, FERPA protects student information, as I'm sure all of you educators already know, but school districts can really pass policies that reaffirm their commitment to not handing over information about their students to federal immigration officials unless they are presented with a warrant or a court order that is signed by a judge. Oftentimes, immigration agents may present an ICE warrant or a removal warrant, but those are not the same things as warrants that are actually signed by a judge. So if you do find yourself encountering any ICE or immigration officials who say they have a warrant, please make sure to read the warrant and make sure that it is signed by a judge. And schools and school districts can also make sure that they remove any sensitive information from student records, such as social security numbers or place of birth, things that might indicate whether or not their students are documented or undocumented, but also just at base, it's important to remember that schools cannot refuse to enroll students because of their immigration status. Schools are required to accept enrollment regardless of whether a student is documented or undocumented. And so schools should really reevaluate their enrollment policies to make sure that they are not requesting documents that discourage undocumented people from enrolling children. I know that we will also, I can also have Dina or Joanna send some information, additional information that could be helpful to all of our educators on the line after the call. But thank you.
Thank you so much. So actually one question came up, and I don't know if you can answer it, Diana, is have these safe zone harbors extended to colleges and universities?
That's a good question. And admittedly, I'm not an expert in this. I am not sure, but I believe the answer is no. But I can do some more research and find out and send a more confident answer with the additional resources after the call.
Thank you. And then another thing that I see here is those who have lived here for more than 2 years, what should they do to avoid getting an extradited deportation or an expedited deportation? If we don't cover it in later parts of the presentation, we can definitely answer that in a few more minutes, but we have seen the questions. So just so you all know, I am reading the questions from the text box. Thank you, Diana. We're going to go on to Dina, who is going to cover the next part of the presentation.
Hi, thanks for coming to the webinar. So as Joanna mentioned, I'm covering for United We Dream. So I just have a few things that I'm going to go through, and of course, in the end, I will discuss some resources that you guys can refer to, for more information. So can everybody hear me fine? I just want to make sure. I think so. Because I am on speaker, so I just want to make sure. But I'll do my best to project my voice. So the first thing I'm going to go through is how the status of DACA. Okay, great. The status of DACA. So DACA is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And as Diana mentioned, there are some adverse effects that the executive orders can have on people. One of the things that teachers and support staff should point to their DACA students are that if they do have criminal records, they may now be at risk under the new priorities. And I say priorities within quotations because we don't know if we could even call what the new executive orders are priorities. But just to establish, DACA is in fact still in effect. It can affect a number of students, but it is important for teachers and support staff to know that not every undocumented student is a DACA recipient. So it's best to distinguish the two categories. And it's also important to consider that DACA may not last. We don't know how long it's going to stay in effect after the executive order, so it's also important to keep that in mind. For DACA students, current DACA students now, those who undergo the program called Advanced Parole, this is a program which allows DACA students to travel abroad on a work permit for volunteer purposes. So United We Dream are actually advising folks who are part of this program to hold off, to tell their students to hold off on international travel until the status of DACA is more clear. That's just in case. For first-time DACA applicants, so if teachers or support staff get any questions about how to apply, students will often ask, well, the question really is it safe for people to apply for the first time for DACA? The answer right now that United We Dream is giving is that it's best advised to first speak with an immigration attorney. Teachers should not be giving advice on this because, since the since the status of everything right now under the executive order is so broad and vague, it's best to just have your students, for any questions on DACA, to go to an immigration attorney to speak with them to get screened. Also, students who already have DACA and are renewing it, again, it's important to advise them before they go ahead and renew to speak to an immigration attorney as well. But it is important that if students or families come to teachers or support staff, that they let them know that they do have rights. These are general rights that they have with ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents, and police. These are in the event that they do come to schools. The first is the right to remain silent, and the second is the right to not be searched without consent. So consent can come through a verbal means, or also, if they were to just be let into a school, I'd assume opening the door to ICE allows them to come in without a warrant, or to ask for a warrant. And again, like Diana said, a warrant should be signed by a judge. So overall, it is quite difficult to say what will happen with DACA because the executive orders are quite vague. They're also broad, and the administration has been very spotty and inconsistent in the way that they explain what's been going on. So just bear all these things in mind, and it's difficult to give students a conclusive answer right now. So as I mentioned, it's best to have them referred to an immigration attorney. So a second thing that teachers can do to kind of, to kind of get their students prepared, or just, get themselves prepared in addition to the support stuff, is to inquire on whether their schools are safe spaces. Diana mentioned this as well. It's not by default that schools are safe spaces. They actually have to be explicit about it. So it's important for them to go find out whether they are a safe space and then to declare that to their students, so their students and families know that. And then teachers and support staff should also develop a safety plan. This is in case ICE does try to come into the school. I know under the Bush administration, there were explicit guidelines stating that ICE wouldn't go to schools. Right now, we don't know what that looks like. So just in case ICE does come to school, teachers and support staff should be aware of what they will do. So this is something they should prepare in advance, just so they have a plan in action in the event that they do show up. So make sure not only the teachers and support staff, just all general faculty within the schools should be aware of this plan. They should discuss it, maybe practice it, but they should develop protocols. Like Diana also mentioned, do not share students' information, especially sensitive information. They should establish a point of contact, somebody to go to, and they should also establish a communication plan. This is especially important. If ICE does show up, they have a way to contact one another, email, whatever it might be, so they know what's happening. And this is also in the event of maybe community raids, not only within the school. So another thing teachers and support staff can do is to build a task force. This is similar, this is similar to the safety planning. A task force would be a go-to group in the school that has resources available for families. They'd really just kind of act as a support and a place that people can go when they feel unsure or they just have questions or help. There should be clear individuals that students and families can refer families to with expertise on the topic. Again, this should also be prepared in advance, and the task force should have points of contact that teachers and support staff can refer their families and students to. So overall support, a way that they can provide overall support is, this is something Joanna will talk about more in detail, but they should get in touch with local organizations in their town or county to get resources that they can provide the students in case they have any questions that the teacher or support staff cannot respond to. Another great thing that they can do to show support is to bring in an organizational leader or organizer to talk to students about what they can do, maybe have a workshop, a training or something to kind of make students feel more comfortable and empowered. Another way is showing visual support in the classroom. This is something NJCORE I think will touch on after me, but visual support by way of like putting up a graph or some kind of helpful guide in the classroom that really helps students that they can go refer to as well, and they know visually, they see that they're supported. Another way is explicit support, so telling a student that you might know is undocumented or is nervous, you can tell them that you're there for them if they need to speak to you or anything, just showing solidarity in that way. So just an introduction to advocacy, because this is something that Joanna's going to go into. Teachers and support staff can work with students to create some events, trainings, and workshops just to keep things interactive. They can support a local student immigration organization. So if there's a student group within the school, they can help make sure they have resources, just kind of help them get their events and all of that stuff running. Another thing is just participate. This kind of, with the first point, is just to participate in a local organization, something Joanna will also go more into. This just indicates that there's a clear connection with the larger community, and it gives the educator a more nuanced way to support families and community members. So for DACA, okay, so this is kind of on a side note. Another thing teachers can do and support staff as well is kind of showing, is reaching out to maybe representatives or just creating awareness in the general community of how their students, DACA or undocumented, might be affected by the adverse policies that are out there right now, what effects that DACA removal might have on these students and their families. They can even have testimony which speaks to that, just so the community knows that there are students in their communities who are affected directly. So it's important to get that out there. Another thing, like I said, is writing letters of support to representatives about how the policies and practices taking place could negatively impact your students. And you can also empower students to write letters of support. This could be an exercise in class you can do together. And United We Dream has mentioned that they have a petition on their website or a kind of format of how to do this. So the last thing I'm going to go through are some general guides, toolkits, resources, ways to stay engaged that United We Dream was nice enough to give you guys. So there's the first thing, and it's kind of, I guess, a summary of what Diana went through. It's a breakdown of the executive orders. It's super user-friendly. That's through the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, and you should see the link there on the slide. Another thing is information on how to protect students. Again, more nuanced and detailed information than I was able to provide here at weareheretostay.org. Another way for students and support staff to stay engaged is to text Here to Stay at 877-877. This provides information on what's happening every single day. You'll get updates on immigration rights, generally speaking. Education resources, so information on the landscape of DACA, in-state tuition, how to get into college, blogs for educators by educators, and information on scholarships. You should see that is the website for that is weownthedream.org. And then we will send some more information later. So one of the things that we're going to send is a really awesome toolkit. It's very comprehensive, very detailed on how to create a safe space in school. So I kind of introduced the idea. So if you want to actually go ahead and do this and implement it, you can access the education toolkit, which we will send, like I mentioned, after. What is included in this toolkit are lists of what they can do to make sure students feel safe, some advice from immigration and legal experts, and some safe zone resolution language. There's also going to be a few takeaway graphics that could be hung up in the classroom, or it can just be referred to. A hotline number to call if they notice that someone's civil liberties are being violated. That will also be sent after this. A DACA FAQ. This is intended for teachers to have in the classroom to answer questions on DACA, of how they can help DACA students. And the last thing that we'll send is a very thorough guide for educators and support staff working with immigrants and refugee students. It explains the landscape generally with some easy to follow graphics, how to support families and create an emergency plan, and a list of resources. So that's it on my end. If there are any questions, I'll try my best with the information and training that I was given to answer these questions. And if not, I will defer to the resources that were provided to me by United We Dream. Thank you.
Thank you all. And Diana just mentioned in the text box, the designated sensitive locations include primary and secondary schools, colleges and universities, hospitals, churches, funerals, weddings, religious ceremonies, and public demonstrations like marches, rallies, and parades. But again, the policy is meant to be a list of places where immigration agents should not prioritize. this does not mean that absolutely no immigration enforcement activities will occur in these locations. So I would just be mindful of that. We have heard of ICE waiting outside of a church. This is where it's so important for immigrant community members and our allies to come together and organize and prepare in case the interaction does come about. Now we're going to hear from NJCORE, who's going to go over a bit more of how teachers can support their students within the classroom.
Hello, everybody. Schools are, when we think of schools, we know them, and they're supposed to be safe havens where we embrace all of our students, our parents, and the community members. And so even though there was a court ruling that happened in 1982, which made free public education for K-12 education and a right for undocumented students, we know that this very law and their rights are under attack right now. And so we have, currently it's been said that we have about 1.4 million children who live in mixed status households. And we, I think earlier Diane mentioned, she talked about mixed status households, and these are the households where you may have, a child who, was born here as a citizen, and then you may have parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles or whoever who may be undocumented. So this, or even siblings too. So you may even have siblings within the family where some are documented, some may not be, right? And so this, suddenly this new state that we're in is causing so much chaos within households, within families, because of this, this executive order that's kind of almost in many ways terrorizing and emotionally terrorizing our students. And then the impact of disrupting this family structure is devastating. So I'm also hearing reports of our babies kind of fearing for their own safety and the safety of their families. Third graders saying that their parents are afraid to come outside of their home, and that shouldn't be, right? Our kids shouldn't have to feel that way. I still can't get. Just recently there was a video that was posted that went viral with the girl who had recorded her father being taken away and the crying, right? So I can't get that out of my head. And as an educator, our first response is, in many ways, because we work with humans, we're a human-centered profession. So our desire and our need and our focus to want to emotionally care for our students in addition to provide for them educational and pedagogically. And in many ways, just this whole state that we're currently in just kind of shows that we've kind of lost sight of our humanity in many ways. And I think I love that everyone's here on the phone call to kind of help us find ourselves back to where we need to be. So even, last year when I was in the classroom, there were raids that were happening around, I want to say it was spring or whatever, and the sense of fear that went through our students, and all they wanted was a place to be heard and seen, right? And so what I'm going to be talking about is when we think of restorative practices, oftentimes we think that it's only supposed to be when we're dealing with interpersonal conflict. But in many ways, it's just another way of just how we deal with each other in very just real and human ways. And so, so restorative practices are just not for conflict problems or interpersonal conflict. It can be just conflict in general, right? How do we deal with trauma? How do we help people heal? Healing is a process. It's not something that's static and that, we're going to put you in a circle and we're going to have this conversation and suddenly you're going to be healed. There's a process of having, this constant conversation and dialogue and sharing and empathizing and caring for each other. And most of all, I think that should be where, as educators, we should be prioritizing, especially if we have students that are experiencing this kind of trauma. When we think about even as an adult, right? So adults, we go through trauma and violence, whether this is physical, emotional, psychological. We still feel the need to have space to process this trauma. And, children are no different. We often don't allow them to have that kind of space. And in many ways, too, our schools have been stripped of resources where we don't have enough guidance counselors or licensed clinical social workers. And so it's at this place and time now where we're going to see the need for educators and educational support professionals to kind of fill that role to so it's almost like we're taking on this identity of, this it takes a village, right? So we're really just taking that on, the African proverb, how we say it takes a village to raise a child, and applying that to how we do schooling now, especially in this climate where students who are immigrant students who are undocumented, who are Muslim, right? Because even that's another space that we haven't even touched on yet, because that's part of this executive order too as well. Storytelling, when we're thinking too in terms of pedagogical approaches, sometimes students just want to be heard and seen, and how we as educators allowing space for them to tell their stories, creating a safe space for them to tell their stories, because storytelling can be healing. And for many of our students who come from communities or cultures where oral history and oral storytelling is a part of how we learn and how we do and how we process life, right? And if we're creating that kind of space in the classroom where we're allowing for our students to tell their stories, right, and share, and keeping in mind that we want to hold their stories sacred and private, and not force them to, of course, too, as well. Another way pedagogically is that we can actually help our students who are experiencing this kind of trauma is through art, right, and theater, right? Part of, for those who may be familiar with Theater of the Oppressed, right, which kind of looks at how oppressed groups are experiencing this oppression and this trauma and all the things that are happening in their society and what they can do and how they can embody, right, and demonstrate this through art and theater, and hopefully help process and help heal from the trauma that they're experiencing. I think most importantly, the bottom line is how can we create more human-centered spaces in the schools and our classrooms so that we are supporting the needs of our students in every way. And, I'm excited to see so many people on the call because, one of the first things you want to do, of course, is educate ourselves, and which, we're all doing right now. Also, too, which everyone else has kind of spoken to as well, when even outside the classroom, if we're looking at how do we help our communities heal and protect and keep our students safe, I can't emphasize this enough, is through organizing. And I know this is going to come up again, but in many ways as teachers, we need to start seeing ourselves as organizers too at this time and place. If we want to create a more democratic United States of America, a more democratic society where, everyone's voice, where we all are truly, where there's liberty and justice for all, truly, right? And so what can, teachers do is we can also, too, is encourage our boards of ed to adopt policies and resolutions. So the NEA released some information after their webinar that they had a couple weeks ago, where they had a sample resolution that teachers could use, and that will be sent out to everyone soon too as well, and which you can adopt and modify, and by including your own district, and then ask your schools and your districts to adopt this resolution to protect and keep your students safe from ICE, right? Because we don't know what could possibly happen, considering it's so up in the air at this point. In terms of teachers' and students' rights in the classroom. That looks differently depending on the board, your district, your local. And so I encourage teachers to reach out to their union representatives. There's no way I can say, oh, this is what the rights are for your district, because it's going to look differently depending on where you are. So you may find one district that may be very liberal and more open to teachers having conversations that are critical, that allow for deep critical thought, and then you may find places where they may not be, right? And so in those cases where you're seeing that happening, right, that's also, too, where some organizing work needs to happen. If you know that the policies that are in place in your board that are not allowing for your children and your students and your families and communities to be safe, then it's time for teachers to start organizing and working with the people in their communities so that they can push for policies and strategies and regulations that are going to protect our students and keep them safe. The thing is and it all has a rippling effect. So if our students are coming to school feeling unsafe, feeling worried, feeling scared and fearful, then we know that this also has an effect on their performance, too, in school. This has an effect on attendance. And so ultimately, it will make the district a better district when you're making sure that your students are taken care of, right? And that needs to be explicitly expressed, right? Because if students are fearing for their safety and they're not coming to school, that's going to look bad on the school, and that's going to look bad on the district, right? We also know that, but not even thinking more humanely, right? We want to take care of the human beings that are in our care, and that's most important. The attendance rates, the test scores, all of that comes secondary to the well-being of our and the health of our students. There's been tons of research to support that students who do experience this kind of trauma, who do experience this kind of separation of family members and disruption to their communities, it has a larger effect on their health, their performance, their well-being, the overall well-being. And we want to make sure that our number one priority is the students, and this is just one way that we're making that happen. So let me see. Also, another way that we can also support, and this is also in United Redreams on their website, they have a National Institutions Coming Out Day, which is April 7th every year. So if you want to organize a National Institutions Coming Out Day with your school community, and this is pretty much an action where students, teachers, educational support professionals, everybody, the school community is coming out and saying they're going to stand in support of undocumented students, right? And that's just one way you can organize, right, and start advocating for yourselves and the students that you serve. One last thing, too, is there are a group of educators, too, right now throughout New Jersey that are working on organizing meetings, community meetings for teachers and community members that may want to attend that are going to address these needs. And if you're interested in that, you can reach out to me, through email, and I'll be sure to put you in contact with some of these educators and help you organize some things. So thank you.
Thank you so much, ACLU. So I'm actually going to cover the piece about the local advocacy and actions that are available to our residents here in New Jersey. For some background, the New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice is a statewide coalition of organizations. We have 30 organizational members across the state. The ACLU of New Jersey is one of our members, and we are working across the state on local, municipal, county, and state level advocacy on policies that are going to improve the lives of immigrants and make sure that they get exactly what they need to make sure their communities are welcoming and that their communities are supporting their immigrant residents regardless of immigration status. So aside from the policy front, we are also doing and supporting organizing efforts. And so we have resources available to you all so you all know, and you can reach out to us for more sort of on-the-ground support depending on where you are located. New Jersey is a very diverse state. It is also a very large state, maybe not compared to other states, but in our state it takes you a little bit to get around. So we have to figure out where you are located and who is near you so you can hook up with the local organizations that are near you. So you can reach out to myself, Joanna, or Dina, and we can find an organization that is near you depending on where you are located in New Jersey. And we're going to have the contact info at the end for you all. So the current status of advocacy, there is a sanctuary campus movement ran by some youth organizers. Some universities have declared themselves sanctuary campuses, including St. Peter's University, Rutgers University. And so there are schools that are passing policies that are saying that they are welcoming. That is also in the case of actual public schools. So Clifton, the Clifton Public Schools and Piscataway Public Schools already have passed a policy that say that they are welcoming. Elizabeth did something very similar as well. So there are different versions of what could be passed. I know NJCORE also mentioned it, so we can definitely share those different options available to you and then determine what your Board of Ed can do. Obviously, as we mentioned, what ICE can do in terms of entering a building is still up in the air. It's possible that they don't and can't and shouldn't be entering. But the policy is really not just about what the sentiment of your district would be, but also what are they willing to do to support their immigrant students. And it really does send a message to residents in your district that your district is a welcoming district when they put a policy in place. So we do urge you to look into that and approach your Board of Ed and see if they can do that for you. So that's on the campus, the sanctuary campus or welcoming campuses or districts. The other is the fair and welcoming communities. We are also offering, we have come up with a package of policies that cities can put in place. It's basically what most folks refer to as a sanctuary city, but in New Jersey we are really rebranding what that even looks like, because right now, the sanctuary policies are very much a mix of what we see in terms of versions across the country. New Jersey is special, as we all know, and because it is special, we have to do it in a very special way. So there are state laws and federal laws that we have to be mindful of. We at the Alliance have come up with a model policy. So if you're interested in that, you can contact us and we can do the best we can to support you. We will be having a webinar soon on a training on how to pass a fair and welcoming policy in your city. So that is another form of advocacy that you can work with your communities, organize with the people around you to see what you can do within your city. In terms of efforts, other things that we can do on the grassroots level is do know your rights. As NJCORE mentioned, there are a lot of community meetings happening across the state. We are actually going to be rolling out a Train the Trainer where you can become a trained Know Your Rights instructor, so you can actually run the Know Your Rights session in your community. If you need support on that, you can also email us, and I'll have all the contact information for you all at the end, so you will know who to email if you need it. And the Know Your Rights sessions really go through the constitutional rights for community members, prepare them so that they know how to interact with immigration services if they do come in contact with them. And it also covers what they could do to prepare themselves. So I know one of the questions we heard was what happens if somebody has been here for over 2 years? How do they prove that? What should they have on hand? There is a long list of documents that they should start gathering to prove their presence in the U.S. There's a lot that we can put in place so that community members are ready. I know a lot of parents have been asking about setting up powers of attorneys so that they have an agreement with a family member or a friend as to what happens to their children if they are picked up by immigration services. The one thing I'll say now, because obviously it's a very delicate thing that you have to cover through a training, is that we advise you all not to allow people to pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for something like that. I know in a lot of the communities we're hearing that people are being asked to pay $300 for a notarized letter. That is not a practice that should be happening. That is not okay. The letter, the document that we are advocating for is a free document that you can notarize, and we all know how much it costs to do a notarized paper on the bank or the local post office or with a local friendly notary that can do it for $15. So just be mindful of that, but there are things that community members, that families can do to prepare, and that is part of the Know Your Rights training. that would be available, and Know Your Rights sessions across the state. We can let you know. You guys can check out our website. You guys can check out our Facebook for exactly where those are happening, so that you know if you can't run one, or don't know someone who can, you can find one that's near you. So that's under Train the Trainers, and I see questions coming up, so we'll definitely answer them in a few more minutes. Another is the emergency response, which is what happens when ICE does show up. We will be having trainings on that as well. A lot of advocacy organizations across the state are already doing that, where they're setting up these Comité de Defensa, which are basically defense committees, where they are ready in case ICE does show up. How do you make sure that people can observe what's happening, can report what's happening, and they can actually organize around, well, what if someone does get picked up? How do we get them legal services? How do we get them what they need so that they are not being targeted and just lost into the system for whatever reason? So that's another thing. And then the last thing is the organizing, as we mentioned. And as NJCORE said, it's really the key to all this is going to be organizing. And so, for us, we have to be ready to plug in with our community members. We don't want it to be one of those situations where if a tree falls in the forest and no one knows. We want community members to know that they are surrounded by people that are going to support them, and for community members to know that they're powering numbers. I know that the landscape can be really scary and it's frightening, and for those of us who care about our communities and about our children and our students, we get very nervous around it, but this is not the time for us to panic. This is a time for us to organize. And part of that is creating these spaces, creating organizations, creating community groups, having community meetings, bringing experts to do Know Your Rights sessions, passing these policies, making sure community members know exactly what to do. There was a case in Elizabeth, for example, with one of our member organizations. They had Know Your Rights sessions for all their members. One of their community members, ICE actually came to her house, to her business, actually looking for her, and she knew what to do. She closed the door. She didn't answer any questions, and she was not picked up because she knew her rights. And that is where the power of advocacy and organizing really comes to fruition. So it's really important for us to organize. You can reach out to us. If you go on our website, you will see all the organizations that are part of the network. If you are in a part where there is no organization, we can try and see whatever we can do to support you. That's where the training and the resources are available here for us to build the groundswell of people who are ready to resist, fight back, and protect our communities from being separated. So I'm definitely going to pause there, and we have a couple questions. So I'm going to go through the questions now and see if any of the presenters can answer them or if we can do that as well. So I answered the question about those who live here for more than 2 years, what should they do to avoid expedited deportation? As Diana mentioned, it's possible that they're going to try and expedite people's deportations, so they have to have proof that they've been here. And so it's really important for community members. I know a lot of community members like to hide and live under the radar. That is while it is good to stay out of trouble and try and stay away from anything that could potentially flag you for deportation, you need to have proof that you've been here. Obviously, if you have kids in the district, that is one thing that shows that you've been here and for how long you've been here. But there are many other documents that they should be gathering to prove for their presence is here. So again, I would say link up to a nonprofit organization or organizing organization near you that you can touch base to know more about what can be done on that front. We are not attorneys. Most of you are not attorneys, I assume, so let's not get into the business of telling people what legal documents they should be gathering without the assessment of a professional. What local resources are currently offering meetings or opportunities and resources for immigrant families? So again, the local resources vary by the part of the state. There are grassroots organizations across the state. Some are doing meetings. Some are just gathering members and letting them know what's going on. Some of them are plugged into our network and sharing the information that we share when we have it. So it really depends on where you're located. You have Dina's email here on the screen, so you can email her and ask her, let her know where you live, ask her if there's anywhere that you should be plugged into. We will plug you into the organizations near you, and also check our Facebook and check our website for events, because we do post any events that are available for you to know there. Are there any specific, let's see.
So
I'm going through the questions.
I'm going to respond to Christina, because Christina asked about having a Know Your Rights That's going to be largely because she works with a largely Spanish-speaking community.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
part of this is the relationships that we build within our communities. So look at there might be organizations within your community that's already doing some of this work that you may not have a relationship with. Find out what those organizations are. And I think, Joanna, you mentioned, maybe finding out, identifying, letting us know where you live so then we can help you get plugged in. And that's where, like I said, part of this, not organizing is also part of relationship building, right? And we should be building relationships with people outside of the school building itself, but they're also part of the community. And another thing, too, you may have some Spanish-speaking educators within the school that may not be able to do the know their rights, but they may have contacts outside in the Spanish-speaking community, too, as well. And I think you should possibly look into tapping into that, too, as well.
That's right. And also to add to that is, if you're in a part of the community where there are no grassroots organizations organizing in Latino immigrants or any kind of immigrant in that community that does not speak English, and you guys need presenters. We have a large network of people who are doing these, so people are willing to travel to help. And so if you happen to need a Know Your Rights session, there are plenty of attorneys out there and plenty of organizers that are being prepared and trained so that they can go to you and help you. So if you reach out to Dina, we can send out an SOS to our network if no one is already near you now. And also there'll be trainings in the future, so you can be trained, or you can find leaders in your community that are bilingual that could be trained so that they can also support your community. And then you can run your own Know Your Rights sessions on a regular basis. And yes, the information will be emailed to you all, and we'll email you the materials as well. Another question that came up is, a notarized power of attorney or term of guardianship cover leaving children with another family? So I am not an attorney, so we're just going to preface that with that. But there's been plenty of research right now in terms of what that looks like. Dina, do you want to sort of quickly cover that, or do you want to? It's a power of attorney, whether we need a power of attorney or a term of guardianship to leaving the children with another family.
Yeah. So yeah, again, just to preface, I'm not an attorney, but from the information that we have been in conversations with attorneys for the power of attorney or temporary guardianship, it would include safety planning and different steps to take for leaving your child behind, yes. But there is another bit of advice is to get individuals whose parents are at risk of deportation, try to get them to apply to citizenship or get a passport rather. So that's another thing that attorneys were mentioning. But again, all of this is with my saying I'm not an attorney. So if you really need a good answer on that, I would get in touch with an immigration attorney.
And also to flag for that, in terms of the notarized power of attorney, there's a lot of legal jargon that goes into the difference between a power of attorney and a term of guardianship, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are also a lot of important questions that families are going to have. You can't just sign a document without having conversations with family. It's like a will, right? You're just not going to write a will and sign it without letting people know what that looks like, and especially major decisions like the care of your children. So you have to basically ask community members to make sure that they can that they get help and support from the right people, that they're reputable, that they're not people that are just going to rip them off. Please be careful with that. And if you have any more questions, join the Know Your Rights training, because we'll cover that and train you on how to properly do that. So just letting you all know on that. What does the 2-year stay in the U.S. prove? So, Diana, do you want to go over sort of the reason behind the 2-year mark, why that is important? Or I can, whatever's easier.
Joanna, I'll let you explain that. I think you do a better job explaining it than I would.
No problem. So the 2-year stay basically is that what it seems to be the case, and obviously we can't, the immigration enforcement right now is kind of a moving target, but the priority is, if someone is undocumented and they pick them up and they seem to not be here for more than 2 years, meaning that they just arrived, then they're just going to be pushed for an expedited deportation immediately. That's basically what that's happening, or that is the way they're supposed to be doing the enforcement. So if you get picked up by ICE, you kind of have to prove that they shouldn't rush you out of here because you didn't just arrive 2 years ago. You are you've been here for a while. And so that's where proving the 2-year mark is really important, because people have to understand, exactly that they have to prove that they've been here for more than 2 years, so that ICE knows not to prioritize them over other people. Now, we know that ICE might not even stick to that, but it's just important for you to be able to have a case, so that if you do get in front of an immigration judge, you can plead your case as to why you have ties to this country and you should not be someone who is kicked out. Any other questions that have not been answered, you can email Dina at the email on the screen. We can also email you an update, and that will include a NJCORE's contact information if you need it, and we can go through all that as well. And I will also see what else we can share with you all as we get it. Again, go through our social media and our website if you need anything else. I'm going to give it one more minute in case anybody else has any other questions. And I don't know if NJCORE or Diana want to add anything before we close out.
I just want to thank everyone who made the call. This was amazing. I know that there were a lot of teachers who had these concerns, and thank you, Johanna and Gina and Diana, for being on the call and helping NJCORE and help facilitate this, along with United We Dream and New Jersey Alliance for Immigrant Justice. And we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy days, because you all have very busy days too as well. I know it. Thank you.
Perfect. So again, if you have any questions, please email Dina. Have the contact information on here. Thank you all so much. We're going to email you all the recording of the PowerPoint, the materials that we mentioned during the presentation, and send you any follow-ups. And then if you guys have any questions, please feel free to email us, and we can put you in touch with any of the resources we have in our network. Thank you all so much. Keep doing the wonderful work that you all do, because you're all amazing, working with so many students and being on a PowerPoint, on a webinar after work hours, because I know teachers always work beyond the hours that they do. So thank you all so much.
Thank you. Please stand by.